First and foremost, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We've got some people from California, and it's 11 o'clock over there. It's 8 o'clock in Europe, 9 o'clock in Bulgaria. So we've really spanning the whole day here. And yeah, welcome to the roundtable on the future of sustainable fashion, being hosted by myself, James Armour, and the SDGTalks podcast. My co-host Kevin Sofin is in the chat, so I can see that he's leaving the messages down there. And he will be joining us from there, but I'll be hosting the event today. Thought I could just share a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Scotland, but have been working in Denmark and Copenhagen for an organization called the International Clean Tech Network. So we work to try and support the green transformation and basically the global green narrative for how we can implement clean solutions. But today I'm not representing the ICN. And really it's all about hearing from the six of you panelists. I myself, I'm a bit of a novice on the fashion front. I'm maybe a little bit ahead of the curve because I've not really bought any new clothes for the past 3 years. Both my work shirts and my homewear I've been wearing day in, day out. But really looking forward to hearing more about actually what companies are doing, what individuals really can do who want to engage in more high fashion and still live sustainably. And really what we can do as individuals and collectively to promote sustainable fashion practices. I wanted to share a little bit more about the sort of plan for today. I'm not going to say anything more about our speakers. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves one by one and say a little bit about yourselves and the organization that you're representing. And then we'll dive right into the roundtable discussion. So I will moderate some questions, and please bring in questions from the chat. I can see it right there in front of me. So anything you ask, as long as it's all right enough, I'll probably ask it to one of the panelists if we've got time. And yeah, that's the plan for today. So I think it'd be really cool if I could jump first over to Lydia from Pretty Green Lily, if you'd like to say hello and just a little bit about your story.
Hello, everyone. Well, I am Lydia. I am originally from Spain, but right now I'm in Sofia in Bulgaria. Here I study international politics, but I invest most of my time into Pretty Green Lily, which is my blog, but don't tell that to my professors. So Pretty Green Lily is my little passion project, and I talk about all things sustainable fashion, and my ultimate goal is really to normalize eco-friendly and ethical fashion in the eyes of consumers and fashion lovers everywhere. That's me.
Awesome, thank you. And maybe I could jump over to Marius and Stefan from Public Fiber.
Hello, hey. Hello. Yeah, I'm Marius. This is Stefan. Hi. We are the two co-founders of Public Fiber, which is an online marketplace curating premium, sustainable, and ethical fashion brands.
Yeah. And sorry, James, you just started sharing something in the middle of that. And what we're really trying to do is to reposition sustainability as desirable, and by a collective of brands that we have in our marketplace and are coming to the marketplace, really think we can achieve that by showing you guys like how great these brands can be and how desirable they can be.
Awesome, thank you guys. Great to have you on today. Maybe I could go down to, it says Summer for Peachy Keen Swim, but it's actually Leah that's with us today.
Hi, so I'm Leah, and I am one of the founders of Peachy Keen Swim, based here in LA. And we are a sustainable fashion brand rooted in empowerment and sustainability. So size inclusivity is a huge part of our mission. We offer sizes extra small to 5X. We just want everyone to feel really confident and empowered in their bodies. And, you know, every body is a bikini body. And all of our suits are made completely sweatshop free with sustainability in mind, and just try to have that dual mission of empowering the people who wear our suits and the people who make our suits.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And perhaps Ashley would like to go next from Recycles to Riches.
Sure. Hi, I'm Ashley, founder and president of Recycle to Riches. R2R's mission is to transform the culture of consumption, and we do this in many different ways, but it is through community education, collaboration, and communication.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And last but not least, Teresa Maria.
Hi, everybody. I am Teresa Maria, behind the Outlandish blog. I promote sustainable fashion brands, and I am on a mission to debunk myths and lies surrounding sustainable fashion overall, in terms of prices and sizes, especially. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, there we go. We've got an introduction from everyone there. I think a really nice place to start would be from the sort of issue standpoint. Really, I want to hear, and everyone else wants to hear, although we know a lot of the issues, what the sort of burning issues are today in the fashion industry. And I think, Lydia, that you're in a great position to answer that with your blog, Pretty Green Lily. Maybe if you'd like to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I have given this a lot of thought, and I think that there are two main issues that are the source of every other issue in the current fashion industry. And those are the scale and the speed of production. By the scale of production, we mean mass production. And the speed, of course, is very fast fashion. We have fast fashion. It's based on a very fast output of huge amounts of clothing and of different models. And this can be, of course, applied to the bad fast fashion that we already know, but as well, to a certain extent, to high fashion, which is something that not everyone sees, or we are not intuitively prone to seeing. So yeah, with this fashion market that is constantly pushing new models every day and every week, it's almost impossible to really think about environment or about ethics, and let alone like respect them whatsoever. So I think that this scale of fashion production creates the illusion in consumers that fashion items are somewhat of a single-use item, which, newsflash, they are absolutely no single-use. And we are becoming numb as a public, as consumers, to the consequences that our fashion consumption has. We know that it's bad for the environment, that we consume this sheer amount of fashion items, and we know that it's human rights are not always respected, but we still do that. And the question is why? So this whole situation just keeps feeding this vicious cycle of higher volume, faster output, and impulse consumption. And of course, this is a model of economy of a scale that cannot be sustainable at all. And coming back to the question, I think these two factors, the scale and the speed of production, are the source of all the other problems related to fashion: textile waste, greenhouse gas emissions, natural resource depletion, water pollution, human rights violations, all that ugly side of fashion. So I think everything can be kind of broken down into that.
Completely. Well, I think we all know that there's a lot going on, especially with the resource consumption of having such a volume of fashion being turned over. And I can see there that Stefan has unmuted himself. Maybe he wanted to chip something in there.
I mean, obviously, just exactly what you said, Lydia, just compounding that. I think the fashion industry in 2019 is worth like $1.3 trillion worldwide. So with that comes a massive amount of weight for everything. And some data, like I've got it written down, I haven't memorized this off the top of my head, from the program that I watched on Netflix not too long ago. But in 1980, right, the average American consumer bought 12 pieces of clothes. And today, the average American buys 64 to 68 items of clothing, right? Huge. And of those 64 to 68, half those items only worn 3 times. So I think everything that Lydia said can just be illustrated within that like mass barrel of consumption. And I think that fashion is obviously it's an expression of ourselves. It's stuff that we love to wear it because it illustrates our creativity. So it's important that we don't sort of have a negative spin on it, and actually we look at ways to sort of positively change the industry that we're in and people love being a part of.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, with all this production comes all of the carbon, all of the water use. I mean, a lot of people might know the facts around how much water cotton takes to grow, for example. in already water-stressed regions, for example. And Lydia touched on the actual human aspect as well, people being exploited in the production here. But clearly, fashion is quite an integral part of most people's lives, a lot of people's lives. It's an integral part of society in many ways. And I guess a lot of this comes down to the mainstream industry producing a lot of material and putting out a lot of fashion. But whose fault is it then? Is it our fault as the consumers for buying all of that, or is it their fault as the producers for producing all of that? And I thought, Ashley, that you might have something to say to this, given your experiences with Recycled to Riches.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't think it's either one fault. I think we both have a responsibility to transform the culture of consumption in general. But if you look at it this way, if the producers never, in the beginning, if they made the choice to be ethical and sustainable, the consumer wouldn't have to worry about consuming unsustainable and unethical items, right? They wouldn't have to do the research. But then we go into, if the consumer could do the research with the brands and actually request sustainable and ethical brands, and that's something that the consumer needs, now the producer needs to produce that, because we have to produce what the consumer needs. So we both go hand in hand with this. And if we can come together, and if the consumer can make a stance and say, no, I can only consume sustainable and ethical products, right? And this is challenging to do. I understand it's a big jump, but it's easy if you break it down in a few steps, which we will go over, I'm sure, through this podcast. So basically, if the consumer decided, yes, I am going to make that stance, we as the producers would need to give you that. So we would have to follow that, what you're requesting as a consumer. And we wouldn't be able to skimp our workers and pay them less wages, because you guys are asking the questions. You guys are telling us what we need to do. Who makes this? You know, how much do you pay your producers and your factories? What is the packaging? So that's one thing that I believe we could both do together in transforming this. It's not one or the other. You know, yes, it takes two to tango, right? So let's do this together. Producers, make the right decision in the beginning, right? Decide that moral compass, have a moral compass in the beginning, and know the risks that we're doing with the greenhouse gas emissions and all of that. Know what the risks are if you don't choose the right choice, right? Then as the consumer, decide to make the right decision. Ask your questions, look into the brands, stop buying fast fashion immediately.
Mm.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that, and I don't disagree with anything that you've said. I more slightly perhaps think it's more slightly constructive to angle it in a way that does put more emphasis on the consumer and more pressure on the consumer, because ultimately, if we look at the two driving forces of a brand, a producer versus a consumer, well, brands, and let's face it, the brands we're talking about are the H&Ms, the Zaras, the behemoth brands that produce clothing and underpay their wages, etc. They're driven by profit, by margin, and that's never going to change. Ultimately, let's face it, it's never going to change. But as consumers, we are driven by our social profile, what people think of us, and actually that's something that clothing gives us access to. You know, the reason that fast fashion has become so prominent is because it took high fashion and gave all of us, and I can't speak for anyone else other than myself, but I wouldn't go out and buy Prada jacks every week. I couldn't afford it. But what fast fashion did was gave you the opportunity to have access to that lifestyle at a cost that was never realistic. It wasn't sustainable in itself. So I think really, I think, you know, to walk away with something, perhaps for the people listening today and in general, I think the brands are never going to change how they operate as businesses, because we work in a capitalist society and we're totally driven for profit. It's not a bad thing. People have to consume, but ultimately we can change how brands produce their clothing through changing our our own desire. And I think the way we can change our own desire is actually, and I was going to come on to it a bit later, but I may as well cross the bridge now. I mean, you know, I think we're actually seeing a really nice trend at the moment of individuality. Individuality, at least I can speak for myself, but a lot of the friends I know as well, and maybe it's an aging thing, I'm in my late 20s, but as people become more individual, they often buy much less into the image that these fast fashion brands sell. So therefore, through that, you're much less likely to look to consume more, to buy into this image that you think you need to chase. And actually, you build your own wardrobe. You may spend a bit more on clothes, but you'll wear it infinite times more than you would have done with a fast fashion brand.
And so to build on that, and maybe someone else could answer, I think it's really, really good points, but how then do we put or galvanize the consumers to be more conscious? How do we make sustainable fashion something interesting to them? What kind of tools and levers, and anyone can jump in here?
I'd love to hop on that. I think this is such an interesting debate. A lot of the conversations we have online with our consumers and just people in the sustainable fashion space in general, this is like the biggest issue, because being able to shop sustainably is a huge privilege. You have to have the money to be able to buy clothes that are more expensive than fast fashion, or you have to have the time to go to thrift stores and everything. And I think that doesn't really get spoken about enough, that it really is a privilege to be able to shop with your ethics in mind. And so I go back and forth all of the time of like, who should we put the onus on? Because just like you guys were saying earlier, like the CEO of H&M is not going to wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I changed my mind, I'm going to change everything. And if he does, the board's going to fire him and replace someone else with the same ethics. So really the only thing that is going to create change in the industry is consumer changes. But it's so hard. Like, everyone is busy, everyone is stressed, everyone doesn't have as much time and money as they want. And so it just creates this huge paradox. So what I always try to do is just encourage baby steps. Like, you know, maybe you can't afford to stop shopping fast fashion, but just buy one item from a fast fashion store a month instead of 10. And I'm just a big believer in meeting people where they're at and not shaming anyone for not fully committing to living like a perfectly sustainable life. So baby steps, that's my whole thing, just encouraging baby steps.
I need to jump onto that as well. The saying that buying sustainable is a privilege, I do not believe in that, because I am that person who was jobless, had no income whatsoever, no benefits, nothing. And I was able to shop sustainable because I don't need to do these hauls. What is this fashion haul thing? Where did this even begin? I mean, it's ridiculous. I want to say a swear word, but I won't. Like, you don't need to buy 5 t-shirts at once. Nobody needs that. It's about sustainability. It has to be a mindset change. It's not a privilege at the end of the day, if you really get it, because you're not supposed to buy for the sake of buying when it comes to clothes, like specifically. We've already got so much stuff in our wardrobes anyway. None of us actually need anything new. And when we do need new, yeah, we can afford it because we don't buy bags full of useless stuff every month. So if you buy like 5 fast fashion t-shirts, you pay what, £20 for all of those altogether. And then 3 months later, you need to buy those 5 t-shirts again because they broke down. But if you buy a proper t-shirt for £25, you can wear that for 5 years easily. So you save a lot of money in that. So it's just, in my opinion, it really is all about the mindset shift that needs to happen with the consumer. It is not a privilege. That needs to stop. Like, people need to stop saying that, because it really isn't at the end of the day, if you really think about it and start acting on it from a sustainable frame of mind, specifically.
If I was to come in as well, I would definitely agree with that point. That at least I don't think it's it's solely a privilege, but also I totally understand Leah's standpoint that it's small changes, and you don't just go from one being buying 5 t-shirts every month kind of person to someone who buys whatever, something sustainably and has a new model. And it takes time to make that transition. And how maybe someone has some sort of idea around like an incentive, or how can we support people in doing these changes and transitions, and what kind of tools can we use there? And there's a question there from someone in the chat that was very much in this thread.
I'll continue on that. Education, awareness. We need to talk about this. I don't understand why governments don't talk about it, why it's not on the news, because I mean, fashion industry being the second biggest polluter at a time like this, why is nobody talking about that? I don't understand. So definitely more awareness and a lot more education, because a lot of people don't even understand what sustainability actually means. They think it's eco-friendly fabrics alone, that's sustainability, but no, it's just one part of it. So there's definitely a lot of space for better awareness and a lot of educating to do, for sure.
I'd like to hop in here, sorry, hop in here about that, because we are all about the education, and that is one main thing that we believe could change people and make them want to shop. If they saw the background and they saw the sweatshops and they saw what we see as the sustainable side and fighting that, maybe they would want to change, and maybe they would want to give more meaning to their clothes. So I do believe that's one incentive. If you can just see the percentage of the greenhouse gas emissions and all of our destructive ways that the fast fashion industry has produced, and ever since the Industrial Revolution. But if we could see our ways, maybe we would change. I know not everyone would, but it would definitely give us a big margin of a difference. And also, I just want to hop back onto whose fault is it, only because this will come into making the right decision and giving incentive. Like, we never want to give shame to the consumer at all. Like, this is definitely, producers have made this decision to do this. And in the beginning, it was all about giving to the new age and developing quick and growing as fast as we could as America, right? Or as anywhere. We just wanted to be industrialized. So it comes from that age. And we're not like that anymore. We developed, we changed. So yes, we do take time to think of our clothes now. This new generation, I'm also in my mid-20s, we think of our clothes, we think of what we put on, and we want to look like our own personal style. So it's not a privilege, it's kind of where the world is going. But I do also agree that it could be a privilege, only because if you're looking at sustainability with only the brands that are sustainable and really making that effort to make sustainable clothes, it's expensive to make sustainable clothes the right way and be ethical. It's very expensive to do that, sadly, to produce, right? But if you are able to shop at a thrift store or a local church that gives away clothes, that's also being sustainable and keeping things in the loop. If you're able to repair something that might not have a button on it, and you can put a button on it, you're keeping this in the loop. If you can buy 100% cotton t-shirt and it can degrade at the end of its life cycle, you're doing what we are asking everyone to do. So it's not a privilege, it's about awareness and realizing that it can be easy and be looked at in a different manner.
I think, James, it's an interesting one, because you asked what began this round of discussion was you asking how we can incentivize the consumer to buy sustainably. And I noticed in the chat, Ella asked, how do we change that mindset? Because consumerism isn't going to change overnight. I think, like, you have to understand how people work. You have to understand human behavior, and you need to make sustainable fashion desirable. People need to want to wear it, they want to love it like they love fashion themselves. I think the issue that we maybe have is that sustainability is a silo, as is streetwear, as is high fashion, when actually sustainable fashion shouldn't be its own silo. It should be like the core foundation of every aesthetic, of every sort of silo within that. I think that probably is the key. Education, I genuinely feel like, I mean, we're so absorbed in, of course, but you cannot deny the mass amount of impact that fashion has. I think everyone probably is aware of the environmental impacts of fashion now, but change hasn't happened. So you need to think about how we can really work with people, work with consumer, and make it look good, make it feel good, make it be as good, make it be better, make it be terrible.
Which is ultimately, you know, what Public Fiber was founded on, right? For a shameless plug here. This is where we start rolling our program. Stefan and I filmed a short video earlier that we'll play in a second. No, but you know, on a serious note, I mean, Stefan and I kind of had an acknowledgement that we could consume better, but we are two guys that are very interested in fashion, and I'm you know, I enjoy fashion, I enjoy buying it. But when we started to look for more sustainable brands, there wasn't, you know, there wasn't somewhere that you could go to which had that validation, which gave these brands the accessibility to the market. You know, let's face it, people aren't going to spend ages researching brands. At least, I mean, I can speak for men when I say that one. I wouldn't spend ages doing it, but I would go somewhere that I trusted and that I knew would curate brands, which is what we started doing, right? And I think, you know, we're kind of leveraging the awareness that the guys are talking about, and we're giving it accessibility to these brands for people to shop them.
No, and that's what I like, you guys. That's what I like that you do, is you give it accessibility and you make it look desirable, which is what fast fashion did and what all these other brands did in fashion. Fashion alone is desirable, but when you can combine those two, sustainability and desirability, that's one thing that can definitely change.
Some words from Stefan before was, let's make sustainability sexy. And I think that's key here. Make it so that it's really appealing and that people actually want to get involved in it. And I just wanted to say something about there's I think a feeling in the chat that, you know, CEOs of these big companies are just all in it for the profits, which I do agree with. But I do think that there's been, in the last 5-10 years, and especially now 2020, a big shift in mindset, not just us as individuals and consumers, but also coming from the top. So governmental regulations are coming through. You're seeing a lot of investor pressures actually wanting to report on water usage. That's more new, but definitely sort of CO2 emissions. And these kind of and then of course we've talked a lot about, or at least Stefan mentioned the documentaries, the David Attenborough, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, but there's all these sort of different things coming through on Netflix, which is what everyone spends 90% of their time on these days, which I think is really pushing this narrative in a good way. And you're also seeing the sort of bottom up Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg and whoever else, these kind of grassroots movements that are taking hold. So I think there is a kind of multi-pronged push from lots of different angles. And to maybe steer it in a slightly different direction. And I can see someone's asked a question on this in the chat. It also means that maybe lots of companies are going to try and ride this wave and present themselves to be sustainable when they're not, and greenwash. And I'm just wondering, how can somebody evade greenwashing, and how can somebody get around that? And it's completely open to the floor. I see Lydia's unmuted herself, so she can take the floor.
I think that greenwashing is impossible to avoid. It's everywhere. It's marketing, and marketing is everywhere. Everyone wants to sell us things. So we have to really be careful as consumers. And it comes back to that, to being educated about the topic of sustainability in fashion. Because even when you're on Instagram, on social media, a couple of weeks ago, I saw one of these big fashion influencers, Instagrammers, with over 1 million followers, that was talking about the conscious line of H&M. And well, people, when you tell them, well, H&M has this sustainable line, they have this sustainable collection with these 20 models, they tend to generalize that into the whole brand. So somehow they end up thinking that H&M is sustainable. And it's not like that. And the same with ASOS. ASOS, it's a huge producer and has been a huge producer for years. They push hundreds of new designs every single day. And as well, a couple of weeks ago, they released this sustainable line that has, I think, 25 pieces, 25 designs, and it's 0.035% of their whole offer. And somehow consumers sometimes generalize these ideas of, oh, they have a sustainable line, and they think that the whole brand or the whole company, the whole business is going sustainable, and that's not like that. And that's one of the things that I find very worrying. They try to kind of hide that 99% that they're doing wrong by pushing in our faces more and more the 1% that they're doing right, or like the little efforts that they're making towards the right direction, which, yeah, any effort is worthy of. But
it's almost unavoidable then.
Yeah,
I can see that Teresa's raised her hand. Maybe you got some comments to add.
Yeah, about these influencers promoting, especially H&M, when they came out with this trash dress or something that was made out of recycled material, and it cost 20 euros. I was like, that is not sustainable. It's H&M anyway, so it can't be sustainable. And that's the thing, like, this is the most colorful, the loudest way to greenwash people, to come up with these sustainable collections to sort of pull a curtain over the rest of their operations. And people buy into that. They really do, because they don't know any better. So again, we come back to the education. But at the same time, I am thinking there has to be some amount of responsibility on these influencers as well. I mean, they're called influencers, so they influence people to buy this stuff. And there have been cases where people have been influenced to buy a bra, for example, that had formaldehyde in it. So it caused skin problems, obviously. And I mean, if I was the influencer who told somebody to buy that bra and they got skin problems from it, I would not be able to live with myself. But there are so many influencers out there who don't care. And then there is this other portion who just don't know. I don't know how to tell them apart, and I noticed that when I commented on this trash dress advert or whatever it was on Instagram, like this, I know this influencer wants to be more sustainable, but she doesn't know what sustainability means. She's not very educated on this. So she was promoting this dress, and I was trying to tell her that this is not the way to go. Please don't promote them as sustainable. This is very, very bad. And she gave me this litany of excuses that I could tell were given to her by H&M. So the brands are also greenwashing the influencers, obviously, to oblivion. So that even if you try to give them the actual facts, they're like, no, it's not like this. They're very good, very good. Like, no, darling, no. Also, there's the contract. Obviously, they can't say anything bad about the brand, but I do think they need to do a bit more research before they start promoting known fast fashion brands as sustainable, because they do have they must have some sort of responsibility over what they promote. I hope so. I'm not sure. Is there any regulation on this? I don't know. But yeah, that worries me. That really does worry me.
Regulation. But I want to say something about, basically, the consumers can ask questions to know about greenwashing. And you can shop on Recycle to Riches and not be greenwashed. You can shop on Public Fiber and find a bunch of sustainable brands that are fashion brands. We have resources out there now that you can definitely see if they're greenwashing. Look at the tag. If they say that they're using sustainable fibers, please look at the tag and know what percentage of sustainable fibers they're using, because that's a big, they'll use 15% sustainable fiber. Not sustainable. You need 100%. But again, they're trying to make sustainability accessible to the world, but then that's clear greenwashing. They're trying to cover up things as well. So you have to do your research on the brands and ask questions, because the people that want to answer the questions are sustainable and ethical, because they want to give you the information of their life cycle analysis on that one product, because they care about you, the consumer.
Speaking about the life cycle analysis, we actually do have Leah here from Peachy Keen Swim, and I was wondering if you could tell us a bit from the standpoint of a company. You know, you produce your own clothing. How do you reduce your footprints? How do you source your materials? How do you produce? How do you transport? What do you use for packaging? We've touched on some of these things.
Yeah, a big part of our mission when we were, designing our suits was making sure that our mission is carried out throughout our entire process and our entire supply chain. So we start with a very high quality and durable material, and are now committed to only using recycled materials as well. And it's so important, as we all know, to produce something that is going to last, so that it doesn't end up just getting worn a few times, thrown out, contributing to waste and everything like that. And we also ship with fully compostable mailers that are, all of the carbon made for the mailers are completely offset, and same with all of our packaging. All of our tissue paper is compostable and made from vegetable starch and things like that. And I think it's just really important to think about sustainability, not just in the direct raw materials, but also all throughout the supply chain. And also our entire first collection was produced in LA, so there was no shipping. We just drove there, went to pick it up, which is great. But I think making sure that you really think about your entire supply chain is really important.
Does that affect you in your pricing? Does it make you less competitive?
I mean, it's so worth it to me. It's definitely going to be a little bit more expensive, but that's kind of the challenge of our generation. That's exactly what we're in here for. There's this huge push and pull in the industry right now where things are going to be more expensive if you produce ethically and sustainably, but it's, that's what we signed up for. So I think that there's a lot of companies doing a really good job. The compostable mailers we got are definitely more expensive than traditional mailers, but they've done a great job on their end of really making it relatively affordable for brands. And a lot of sustainable brands really have each other's back, which is great. And so you might need to order 5,000 to get a minimum order quantity of sustainable mailers. And a lot of smaller brands will link up and say hey, do you want to go in on this together so we can get the deal at the higher price point, but split it between ourselves. So I think that community collaboration is a great way to work around some of these issues.
I can totally imagine that your consumers are very loyal and they're in it for everything else, right? So you've got that security going forward.
Yeah, transparency is everything. Consumers are so smart these days, it's such a gift and a curse marketing to such conscious consumers, because you can't greenwash. They're going to call you on it, which is incredible. So it's really great having that second accountability system of really conscious consumers.
Awesome. Well, I'm wondering now if anyone has anything they'd like to share on maybe the more positive trends. You've said that it's good. You think consumers are becoming a lot more conscious, Leah. Ashley, do you have any thoughts on where you see fashion going? How you think the industry might change?
Yeah, I feel really strongly that people are going to start slowing down on their consumption, and taking time to repair or send repairs to people to get repaired. And I find that once that happens, we're almost like a pendulum, right, guys? So we go this way too far, which was the fast fashion, industrial age. And then the pendulum is going to slowly go to way back, right? And then we're going to come right into the middle and have a really awesome ground of production that helps the environment, not just takes, but gives back while it produces. And also, of course, I'm going to have a good opinion about this. I'm in the industry. I want this change to happen. So this is what I see going on from what I see the sustainable brands and ethical brands are doing and where we're going with it. So I do find that it's going to slow down consumption, but the items that are going to be consumed are going to be quality, going back to when it was quality, and then also just with the earth and the people in mind when it's being made. So I do find the trends are going to go swinging that way. Only because I'm around it 24/7 and I'm researching this 24/7, and it's much more positive than it seems because there are options out there and you just need to see the positive sides of where the trends are going. And that's where we're going. We're on a fast track towards that sustainable production.
It's great to hear from someone who's done all the research. And maybe I could swing over to Stefan and Marius.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at some positives, I mean, there's really, really amazing and innovative sort of materials and fibers coming out at the moment. I'm sure some of the guys, well, all of the guys are familiar with them. For example, there's Econol, which is a recycled nylon made out of recycled fishing nets, and it's actually fully circular. So when you're done with that fiber, it can be recycled back down to pellets and remade. There's something called Tencel, which is made out of beech wood in a very sustainable process where a lot of the beech wood is made. It's super, super soft. Some of the brands that we work with use that. There's organic cotton. Organic cotton itself is a really amazing fiber that doesn't use extreme amounts of water usage. It actually depends on rainwater. There's something by a bioengineering lab called Modern Meadow. There's a fabric called Zoa, which is a lab-grown leather. There's something called Pineatex by a company that makes leather out of pineapples. We have a brand that makes holders and wallets out of apple cores. So like there's these amazing and innovative sort of materials coming out and innovations coming out. So it is exciting. Like, who doesn't want that? Like a card holder made out of apple cores. It's amazing.
Lydia, I can see you've got your...
He actually has it with it.
I have one.
Pull it out. I can see, Lydia, you'd raised your hand if you wanted to add on some.
Sure. I just wanted to talk to say in the same line that I'm very hopeful as well for the future of sustainable fashion, because I see that even fast fashion brands are making some effort. So you know that people are doing something right when even the evil tries to do some effort to make some effort. So I was researching for one article on my blog, and I went into Boho and into Zara, H&M's websites, and now they have these huge sustainability pages with like reports that start in 2019. So you know that their efforts have started on those years, or like that right now people are asking questions, so they have to answer somehow, back to what we were talking about. And as well as a political scientist, I have to say that as well, I have a lot of hope in what governments, and not only governments, but also international and supranational organizations are doing in this sense. I have a lot of hope about the legislations and regulations from the European Union in terms of environment. I'm very hopeful about that, about the efforts of the United Nations as well. Maybe I'm a dreamer, but it's how I see it. I really see that there's a very positive movement into the right direction. So I think there's a lot of things to be hopeful for, really.
Awesome. And Teresa, it looks like you also had a hand up.
Yeah, I just want to like round it all up. Like, I totally agree with all of you. I am seeing very positive signs, especially like among younger generations. They seem to be a lot more aware of what's going on. And well, obviously with the climate crisis being basically, it already existed when they were born. So they've been aware of it since they were able to understand. Whereas for us, my generation and older, it's kind of new, kind of. So for us, the mindset change is going to be harder in terms of going away from fast fashion towards sustainable fashion. Whereas the new generations, I think they are going to be going towards the sustainable anyway, because for them, there is no other option, basically. So that's definitely...
Probably a lot of social pressure there as well for the younger generation, seeing it all on TikTok and whatever else there's people are using these days. No idea. I'm wondering if Leah, maybe you could also share, and it could come from a company's perspective. What have you got in the pipeline for Peachy Keen Swim for making yourselves even more sustainable?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier, we've committed to only using recycled materials from here on out. We also have a huge goal of becoming a B Corp, which is just like a sustainable type of corporation that puts like your mission first before profits. So we are, I think like our biggest goal as a company is just to continue to find ways to get our price point down while keeping our ethics the same, because I think the biggest thing that the sustainable fashion industry, in my opinion, should be focusing on is making sustainable fashion more accessible. And honestly, someday it would be great if the sustainability is just an afterthought, where you're only shopping at sustainable places and you can kind of get back to just shopping for what you want, and you can just trust that where you're shopping is paying their workers fairly and is producing ethically and sustainably. So that's the whole goal, is just finding ways to get sustainable fashion into more people's hands.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a really nice note for us to kind of conclude that side of things. And I definitely think that we're going to see so many more pressures. I mean, the European Green Deal and other sort of government incentives. I think in France, they just put a huge amount of money out towards hydrogen and all sorts of, that's energy related, but it all kind of stems down to this green transition, which crosses across so many different sectors. And as other people in the more evil side of things, somebody used that word earlier, somebody that's maybe more profit driven or is more considering sort of assets, as the climate side of things worsens and we see the increasing frequency and magnitude of extreme events and stranding of assets, really, we will see more pressures coming from the top onto actually making life more sustainable, which I think is really cool. And I just put in the chat there because there was a lot of questions coming throughout the discussion, but I couldn't really answer them because you were all in a bit of a flow. So I was wondering if anyone listening in had any last questions for anyone specifically, or anything you'd like to hear about pineapple wallets or Apple suits. But if not, then just wanted to say thank you very much to the six of you. This has been a really, really cool hour, and it was really great to hear more about all of your perspectives and everything that you're getting up to. Kevin's coming in with one last left fielder, which is, I think, going to be the ultimate question that is very difficult to answer, but how can we influence consumer mindset? I don't think that can really be packaged in one answer. If anyone wants to jump in, then
I'm just going to repeat myself: education, 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 and awareness.
Who's paying for the education?
Base for everything.
Okay, we have.
I think also just doing more talks like this and being able to get that and the word out there. And the more people talk about it, the more people are going to transition. And don't be afraid to speak your mind about sustainability and tell your friends all about it. Like, word of mouth is the best way of marketing, right?
Completely.
I think that the key can be, sorry, I interrupted you. Were you going to say something?
No, you go ahead.
I think it's very important to make the whole conversation around sustainability non-intimidating, because some people get this feeling that we're talking about the apocalypse and everything, we are doomed, and it's sometimes an uncomfortable situation talking about waste and pollution, and it can be anxiety-inducing. So I think the key is making this whole conversation not intimidating, making it fun, and making people understand that actually finding sustainable alternatives to their go-to fast fashion options can be very fun, they have a lot of more options other than just sustainable brands. If they don't have the resources, maybe they can go to clothing swaps, maybe they can shop secondhand. Most of the clothes that I own were my mom's like 30 years ago. So you can find it anywhere, and you can really find really good alternatives anywhere. So I think we have to we need to make this message more accessible and understood, and sound more fun and more exciting.
Awesome. I think it would be really nice to then have one final mic drop from everyone, as we've seen in the comments. If you can all leave one line for whatever you want to say about sustainable fashion, we can go through the tiles. If we go with Teresa first.
Shop your wardrobes, and if not your wardrobe, shop your mom's or your dad's. Awesome stuff.
Lydia?
Simply that sustainability is really fun and sustainable fashion is really fun, and we just have to find the best way for each of us. There's not a one size fits all.
Awesome, thank you. Marius and Stefan?
I would just say I think that actually what's becoming more apparent, and probably what has been the feeling for too long, is that sustainable fashion has often been at the compromise of one's own personal style and aesthetic. And I think through the amazing innovation of the brands that we feature on Public Fiber, but beyond that as well, you know, I'm not just plugging Public Fiber here. I think what's becoming really apparent is that there are amazing designers that work in sustainable fashion, and they're bringing some brilliant brands that we all want to buy into. So yeah, you know, there is no compromise in buying sustainable fashion. It's only a good thing.
Awesome. Cheers. Thank you, lads. And Leah?
I would say try not to lose hope. I think for all of us who care a lot about the environment, there's a ton of days where you're like, we're just screwed and this is so bad. But you know, just trying to really keep your hope alive is good. And I would also say hear from different voices. I know there were a lot of really interesting comments in the chat, and I think it's really important with sustainable fashion to look at it through a really intersectional lens and hear from people of all different backgrounds about what their challenges are. So diversifying the voices you hear from and trying not to lose hope are two things I'm working on right now. Hopefully everyone else can work on them too.
Awesome, thank you. And Ashley?
Yeah, so basically, I want everyone to know that everything can be something. So if you want to throw it out, think of something that you can use that for before you toss it out, okay? And then also sustainability, like they were saying, no compromise at all. And just ask questions, please. That's the best thing you could do as a consumer, is ask the brands questions about what you're consuming.
Amazing, thank you. And thank you everyone. It was really cool to do this. This is the first time we've done a live event at the SDGTalks podcast. Up until now, it's just been weekly one-on-one podcasts. And I'd just like to say that if anyone listening or anyone in this discussion would like to come on the podcast, it would be really cool to go into more depth on exactly what you're up to and your relation to sustainable fashion. And that going forward, we want to do monthly events. So we're looking at fashion today. Next month, we're going to be looking at sustainable travel, and I don't know what other ideas could come up. So please, if you've got anything that you'd like to talk about or any ideas that you think could come on the podcast or any of these live sort of events, please feel free to shoot them over. It's really, really appreciated. And yeah, just a final thank you to everyone. It was really, really cool to have you on tonight and this morning.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Thank you. Cheers.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.